What are you even doing here? You were uninvited yesterday." The words cut through the wedding reception like broken glass, every head snapping toward me to watch my public humiliation. I only smiled sweetly at my son's bride, the woman I'd spent $43,000 trying to make happy. "I'm leaving," I said, "but first, meet my special guest, an old friend of yours." When Jessica saw who was standing behind me, her face drained of all color, whiter than her overpriced gown, before she collapsed onto the Italian marble floor. If you're watching this, hit subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. You're probably wondering how a 67-year-old grandmother ended up orchestrating the most outrageous wedding crash in Charleston's history. Well, let me tell you. It all started 6 months ago, when my son Andrew brought home the most beautiful liar I'd ever met. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Margaret Thompson, though everyone just calls me Maggie. Until last week, I believed I was planning the wedding of the century for my one and only child. I'd emptied my late husband's life insurance policy, cashed in bonds, and even borrowed against my house to give Andrew and Jessica the fairy tale wedding she swore she'd dreamed about since childhood. The venue? The prestigious Bellamy estate, with its sprawling gardens and antebellum charm. The dress? A $12,000 Vera Wang, needing 3 alterations. The flowers? 2,000 white roses flown in from Ecuador. I paid for every single petal because, as Jessica tearfully told me, her family had cut her off from marrying beneath their social status. My heart ached for the poor girl who, I thought, had given up everything for love. I even offered her my grandmother's pearl necklace, a family heirloom passed down for 4 generations. "Oh, Mrs. Thompson," she whispered, eyes glistening with what I believed were tears of gratitude, "you're like the mother I never had." What a performance that was. Andrew was besotted, and I understood why. Jessica was effortlessly stunning, golden hair, doe eyes that could make any man forget his own name. She worked as a pediatric nurse, volunteered at animal shelters, and spoke about children with such genuine longing that I caught myself daydreaming about grandchildren. But something nagged at me. Maybe it was the way her stories never lined up. Maybe it was her strange, inconsistent childhood memories. Maybe it was how she always paid in cash, claiming she was old-fashioned about credit cards. Still, Andrew hadn't been this happy since his father died 3 years ago. That was enough for me. Until the night I uncovered the truth. It happened by accident, like most devastating truths do. I was dropping off wedding favors at Andrew's apartment when I heard Jessica on the phone. In the bedroom, her voice was low, urgent. Something in her tone made me freeze in the hallway. Instead of announcing myself like any normal person would, "Marcus, I told you not to call me on this number," she hissed. "No, the wedding is still on schedule. Yes, I'll have access to his accounts after we're married." "What do you mean you want a bigger cut? We agreed on 30%. My blood turned to ice. "Look, the old lady has already given us over 40 grand. She'll probably gift us more for the house down payment after the wedding. This Mark is worth at least 200,000, maybe more." "No, he doesn't suspect a thing. He's completely hooked." "Mark, my son was a mark." I'd heard enough. I crept back toward the door, hands shaking so badly I almost dropped the box of favors. I slipped out quietly, but once I reached my car, I had to pull over. 3 blocks away I was hyperventilating. Everything snapped into focus. The cash payments, the inconsistent stories, the way she'd slowly isolated Andrew from his friends, convincing him they didn't understand their relationship. She'd even pushed him to add her name to his checking account and upgrade his life insurance because they were building a future together. I sat in my car for an hour, crying angry tears and feeling like the world's biggest fool. Then something inside me shifted. Something hard, something determined. The same part of me that fought tooth and nail during my husband's cancer battle. If Jessica Miller thought she could destroy my son and steal our money, she had picked the wrong family. But I needed proof, undeniable evidence that would open Andrew's eyes and reveal who Jessica really was. So I drove straight home and did something I never thought I'd do in my lifetime. I Googled private investigators Charleston, SC. The next morning, I met Patricia Hayes at a little cafe downtown. Patricia was a former police detective turned private investigator, specializing in fraud. She looked maybe 10 years younger than me, but she carried herself with that no-nonsense authority that instantly put me at ease. "Mrs. Thompson," she said after I finished explaining everything, "what you're describing is a textbook romance scam with a marriage twist. These people are professionals. They study their targets, figure out what they want to hear, and then become exactly that person." I slid a check across the table. "How long will it take?" Patricia's smile was grim. For someone careless enough to use her real voice on the phone, not long at all. 2 weeks later, Patricia called with results that went beyond my worst fears. "Margaret, you're going to want to sit down for this," she said, her voice low and grave over the phone. I was in the kitchen making tea, but her words rooted me to the floor. Jessica Miller doesn't exist. The woman your son is about to marry is actually Sarah Collins, and she has quite a history. I gripped the counter, my knees threatening to buckle. Tell me everything, Sarah Collins. 29 years old, originally from Tampa, arrested 3 times in the last 5 years for fraud, convicted once. She works with partners, usually men. They help her research targets, sometimes even posing as family members to give her cover stories credibility. My tea kettle screamed, but I couldn't move to turn it off. The man you overheard on the phone? Marcus Rivera, he's her most frequent accomplice. They were romantically involved until about 2 years ago when she scammed him out of $15,000 and disappeared. He's been trying to track her down ever since. Finally, on autopilot, I shut off the burner. My mind was spinning. How did you find all this? The miracle of facial recognition software, Patricia said simply, and some old-fashioned detective work. Sarah's been living under the Jessica Miller identity for about 8 months. Fake social security number, fabricated work history, the pediatric nursing job, completely fake. She only volunteers occasionally at a free clinic, just enough to make the story hold up if anyone checks. I sank into a chair, feeling sick. Patricia, I need you to find Marcus Rivera. There was a pause. Margaret, what exactly are you thinking? I'm thinking a man who's been hunting Sarah for 2 years might be very interested in attending her wedding. There was a flicker of admiration in Patricia's voice. You want to bring him to the ceremony? I want to give Jessica exactly what she deserves. My voice was steadier than I felt. Can you find him? Already did. He's in Atlanta, works construction now. I can have his contact info to you within the hour. After hanging up, I sat in my silent kitchen for a long time. Part of me wanted to march straight to Andrew and dump everything Patricia had uncovered. But I knew my son. He was stubborn like his father, and Sarah had been weaving her web for months. She'd already convinced him that any criticism of her was just jealousy, or me trying to control his life. No, this called for something bigger, something public, something undeniable. The wedding was in 10 days, and I was going to make sure it was unforgettable. That afternoon, I called Marcus Rivera. Marcus Rivera speaking. His voice was cautious, clipped, professional. I'd caught him on his lunch break at a construction site in Atlanta. Mr. Rivera, my name is Margaret Thompson. I believe you know my son's fiancée, though you knew her as Sarah Collins, not Jessica Miller. The silence stretched so long I thought the line had gone dead. Then, where is she? She's about to marry my son here in Charleston in 9 days. She's already stolen over $40,000 from us, and she's just getting started. I kept my voice businesslike, calm. I think we can help each other. Another pause. Lady, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but she told her partner Marcus that the mark was worth at least $200,000. She's planning to drain your son's accounts after the wedding and vanish within 6 months. I let that hang in the air. Ring any bells? His intake of breath was sharp. You heard her talking to Marcus? That was me. We had a business arrangement until she burned me. Then you understand my position. I said quietly, Mrs. Thompson, what exactly are you proposing? I'd been rehearsing this moment for hours, turning the plan over in my mind like a puzzle until it clicked into place. She's having a church wedding, 300 guests, very public, very prestigious. What if her past walked through those church doors right in the middle of her moment of triumph? You want me to crash the wedding? Marcus asked. There was something almost like admiration in his voice. I want you to expose her in front of everyone she's been lying to. In front of my son, who deserves to know the truth before she destroys his life. Marcus was quiet for several minutes. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. It was harder, colder. She took $15,000 from me and vanished in the middle of the night, left me holding the bag on a hotel bill and a rental car. I've been looking for her for 2 years. Then this is your chance. What's in it for you? Besides saving your son, I smiled, though he couldn't see it. Justice, Mr. Rivera. Plain and simple justice. We talked for another 20 minutes, ironing out the details. Marcus would drive down the morning of the wedding and wait for my signal. I'd already been uninvited. Sarah had convinced Andrew that his mother was trying to sabotage their happiness. But I knew ways into the Bellamy estate that didn't involve the front door. After we hung up, I realized I felt lighter than I had in weeks. The helpless fury was gone, replaced with something far more satisfying, purpose. The next few days passed in a blur of preparation. I canceled my hair appointment, skipped the dress alteration. If I was uninvited from my son's wedding, I certainly wasn't going to look my best for the occasion. Instead, I focused on other details, the kind that would ensure the wedding had some very expensive complications. 3 days before the ceremony, I made a series of phone calls that would have made a corporate raider proud. The first was to the Bellamy Estates event coordinator, Mrs. Sullivan. This is Margaret Thompson. mother of the groom for the Thompson-Miller wedding on Saturday. Oh, Mrs. Thompson, how lovely to hear from you. I hope you're excited for the big day. If only she knew, actually. I'm calling because there's been a change in the payment arrangement. The bride's family has decided to cover the final balance after all. I paused, letting my voice drip with the kind of grandmotherly pleasure event coordinators adored. It's so wonderful when families come together, don't you think? That's absolutely lovely. Should I expect a payment from them directly? Oh, yes, they'll be handling everything from here on out, in fact. You should probably hold off on processing any payments from my account until you hear directly from the Miller family. I gave her the fake phone number Patricia had confirmed Sarah was using for vendors. They're very particular about handling their own finances. The second call was to the florist, the third to the caterer, the fourth to the photographer. Each conversation followed the same script. The bride's family had reconciled with their daughter. They were thrilled to contribute. They'd be covering all final payments, of course. The Miller family didn't exist, and Sarah would have no idea vendors were trying to reach her on a number she never answered. By Saturday morning, the Bellamy estate would be staring down a very expensive problem with no immediate solution. But my masterpiece, the true jewel of my sabotage, was the call I made to Andrew. Mom? He sounded tired, stressed. I really can't talk right now. Jessica's upset about you not being at the rehearsal dinner. And Andrew, sweetheart, I completely understand Jessica's feelings. My voice dripped with the same maternal softness that had soothed his scraped knees and broken hearts for 42 years. In fact, I've been doing some thinking. I realize I may have been a bit overbearing about the wedding plans. Silence. Then, really, this is Jessica's day. If she feels my presence would be stressful, then of course I should respect that. I paused, letting the words sink in. I love you too much to do anything that might spoil your happiness. Mom's, his voice cracked just slightly. Are you sure? Jessica might change her mind if you talk to her. Oh darling, I don't think that's necessary. You know what? I'm going to take a little trip this weekend. Maybe drive up to Savannah, do some antiquing. Give you to some space to enjoy your special day without family drama. The relief in his voice was painful to hear. That's really thoughtful of you, Mom. I just want you to be happy. Sweetheart, that's all I've ever wanted. After hanging up, I sat staring at my phone for a long time. The conversation had been necessary, but it hurt in ways I hadn't expected. Andrew genuinely believed I was the problem, that my concerns about Jessica came from selfishness or jealousy, not maternal instinct. Well, by Sunday morning, he'd understand everything. Friday evening, Sarah called me herself. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity won. Double quotes Mrs. Thompson, it's Jessica. Her voice was sugar sweet, with just a hint of vulnerability. I wanted to thank you for being so understanding about tomorrow. I know it might seem harsh, but not at all, dear. I completely understand. I matched her tone perfectly. A bride should feel completely comfortable on her wedding day. That's so gracious of you. Andrew said you're going to Savannah for the weekend. Fishing for information. Classic. That's the plan. A little mother dash of dash the dash groom getaway while you to start your honeymoon. Well, I hope you have a wonderful time. And Mrs. Thompson, after Andrew and I get settled, maybe we could have lunch. I'd really like for us to be friends. The audacity was breathtaking. That sounds lovely, Jessica. I'm sure we'll have so much to talk about. After ending the call, I poured myself a generous glass of wine and toasted my reflection. In the kitchen window, here's to family friends. Margaret, I said aloud. May they get exactly what they deserve. Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzly, the kind of weather wedding photographers call romantic and brides call disastrous. I woke at 5 a.m. too restless to sleep, and spent the morning preparing for what would either be the most brilliant or the most catastrophic day of my life. At 9 o'clock, Marcus Rivera called from a gas station 20 minutes outside Charleston. I'm here. Mrs. Thompson, you sure about this? I looked at myself in the hallway mirror, dressed in a simple black dress with my grandmother's pearls, the ones Jessica had admired so much. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. What if your son doesn't forgive you? It was the question I'd been avoiding for days. Then I'll have saved him from a woman who would have destroyed him financially and emotionally. Sometimes love means being the villain in someone else's story until they're ready to see the truth. Damn, Marcus said softly, you're tougher than you sound. I almost smiled. Mr. Rivera, I raised a son, buried a husband, and survived 67 years in the South. I'm tougher than I look, too. The wedding was scheduled for 2 p.m. with the reception immediately afterward in the estate's grand ballroom. I had timed everything perfectly. Marcus would arrive at 1:30 and wait in his car until I sent the signal. I would slip in through the garden entrance, a path I knew well from my many venue visits, and position myself where I could see the ceremony unfold. At 11 a.m., my phone began ringing. First the florist, then the caterer, then the venue coordinator, all panicked. All trying to reach someone from the Miller family about outstanding balances that needed immediate resolution. I let every call go to voicemail. At noon, Andrew called, "Mom, something weird is happening. All the wedding vendors are calling Jessica about payments, but she says she never told them her family was handling anything. Do you know what's going on?" "Oh my goodness, that does sound confusing. What did Jessica say?" "She's pretty upset. She thinks someone is trying to sabotage the wedding." There was a pause. "Mom, you didn't, I mean you wouldn't, Andrew Thompson," I said, injecting just the right amount of hurt into my voice. "Are you suggesting your mother would sabotage your wedding? After everything I've done to help make this day perfect?" No, I'm sorry. Jessica is really stressed, and when people are stressed, they sometimes they look for someone to blame." "Don't worry, sweetheart," I finished gently. "I'm sure it's just a vendor mix-up. These things happen. The important thing is that you're marrying the woman you love today." If only he knew how true that statement was about to become. After hanging up, I checked my watch. 1 o'clock. Time to get into position for the show of a lifetime. I grabbed my purse, took a deep breath, and headed for my car. The drive to the Bellamy estate took 15 minutes through Charleston's historic district. Spanish moss draped the ancient oaks like bridal veils, and despite everything, I felt a pang of sadness that this stunning venue would forever be linked in my mind with deception instead of celebration. But Sarah Collins had made her choices, and now she was about to face the consequences. I parked 2 blocks away and slipped in through the back entrance near the catering kitchen, the one I'd spotted during earlier tours. The staff was too busy juggling payment crises to notice one more woman in a black dress carrying flowers. By 2:15, I was positioned behind a marble column at the back of the chapel, watching my son's face glow with happiness as he waited for his bride. In 15 minutes, that happiness would be shattered and I would be the one responsible. But sometimes, I reminded myself as the wedding march began to play, love requires you to be strong enough to break someone's heart in order to save their life. The chapel doors opened, and Sarah Collins, playing Jessica Miller for the last time, began her walk down the aisle. In her $12,000 dress and my grandmother's pearls, I pulled out my phone and sent a single text to Marcus Rivera. Moments later, Marcus walked through those chapel doors like an avenging angel in a rumpled suit. Every head turned as he strode down the aisle with the confidence of a man who'd been hunting his prey for 2 years. Sarah's bouquet of white roses slipped from her hands and hit the marble floor. With a sound like breaking glass, "Sarah Collins," Marcus called out, his voice echoing through the stunned silence. "Did you really think you could hide forever?" The chaos that followed was everything I'd imagined and more. Andrew stepped protectively in front of his bride, confusion written all over his face. "Sir, I think you have the wrong person. This is Jessica Miller." Marcus laughed, a sound with no humor in it. "Jessica Miller? Is that what she's calling herself now?" He reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila folder. "Her real name is Sarah Collins, and she's a professional con artist. I should know. I was her partner until she stole $15,000 from me." "That's not true." Sarah's voice was shrill, desperate. "Andrew, I don't know this man. He's clearly mentally ill." But I could see the cracks forming in her performance. Her hands shook, and that honey-sweet voice had gained a sharp edge it hadn't had before. The mask was finally slipping. Marcus opened the folder and held up photographs. "Here's Sarah at the Ritz-Carlton in Miami running a credit card scam on elderly tourists. Here she is in Birmingham, posing as a cancer patient to steal from church collection funds." His voice grew colder with each revelation. "And here's my favorite Sarah leaving our hotel room in Memphis with my wallet, my watch, and the engagement ring I was stupid enough to buy her." Andrew's face had gone pale. "Jessica, what is he talking about? He's lying." Sarah's voice cracked. "Andrew, you know me. We're getting married. I love you." "Love?" Marcus barked. "Lady, you wouldn't recognize love if it bit you on your lying ass. You want to know what she really thinks about your precious Andrew?" He pulled out his phone and held it up. "I've got recordings from our partnership. Want to hear what she called him, her pathetic mamas?" "Boy, Mark," the wedding guests began murmuring, a low buzz of shock and confusion spreading through the chapel. I watched from behind my column as my son's world crumbled in real time, and despite everything, my heart ached for him. But Sarah wasn't finished fighting, even if any of that were true. She said, forcing her voice back into its practiced sweetness, "People can change. I'm not that person anymore. Andrew believes in second chances. Don't you, darling?" It was a masterful manipulation, appealing to Andrew's decency and forcing him to choose between believing in redemption or accepting that the woman he loved was a complete fabrication. Unfortunately for Sarah, I'd given Marcus one more piece Of ammunition, second chances, Marcus smiled coldly. Tell him about the other Mark, Sarah. The one you're working right now. Andrew turned to look at his bride, and I saw the exact moment doubt crept into his eyes. What is he talking about, Jessica? I have no idea, she said too quickly, too defensively. Marcus consulted his phone. Let me refresh your memory. 3 weeks ago, you called me asking for advice about a quote. Lonely old bat who's already given you $40,000. Ring any bells? The silence that followed was deafening. Every eye in the chapel turned to Sarah. Waiting for her response, I watched my son's face shift as understanding slowly dawned. And I had to grip the marble column to keep from revealing myself. Sarah's voice failed her. She tried again. That's taken out of context. Context? Andrew's voice was barely a whisper. You called my mother a lonely old bat, Andrew. No, I didn't mean it that way. This man is trying. To what? Tell the truth. Andrew's voice grew stronger now, anger replacing confusion. My mother has given us everything. She emptied her savings account for our wedding. She borrowed against her house so you could have your dream ceremony. The wedding guests were no longer murmuring. They were listening intently to every word. I spotted several people recording on their phones, including Andrew's college roommate, who looked like he was live streaming the entire disaster. Marcus wasn't done. You want to know the real kicker? She was planning to clean out your bank accounts and disappear within 6 months. It's her standard timeline. Long enough to establish legal claim to marital assets, short enough to avoid getting to attached. Stop it, Sarah pleaded, but her composure was gone. Tears streamed down her face. Though I couldn't tell if they were real or just part of the act, Andrew stepped back from her, his face a mask of disgust and betrayal. Is it true? Any of it? Sarah looked around desperately, like a trapped animal searching for an escape. The chapel doors were blocked by curious guests who had moved closer to hear better. The altar offered no sanctuary. Finally, her gaze found mine across the crowded space. Our eyes met, and recognition spread across her face. She knew exactly who had orchestrated this moment, for the first time since she'd entered our lives. Sarah Collins was facing someone smarter, more ruthless, and infinitely more motivated than she was. You, she whispered, pointing directly at me. All heads turned to follow her finger. And suddenly I was the center of attention in a way I'd never intended. So much for staying hidden until the grand finale. Andrew's eyes widened when he spotted me. Mom, what are you doing here? You said you were going to Savannah. I stepped out from behind the column, straightening my pearls with as much dignity as I could muster. I lied, sweetheart, something I learned from watching the experts. You orchestrated this. Andrew's voice was a mixture of horror and admiration. I exposed it. I corrected. There's a difference. Sarah had found her voice again, along with her talent for manipulation. She's jealous, Andrew. Your mother couldn't stand that you chose me over her. She hired this man to destroy our wedding because she wants to control your life forever. It was a clever last-ditch effort, playing on every mother-in-law stereotype in existence. For a moment, I saw doubt creep back into Andrew's eyes. 29 years of Sarah's practiced manipulation against 67 years of my love and sacrifice. Which would he choose to believe? That's when Marcus played his trump card. Mrs. Thompson didn't hire me, lady. I volunteered. He held up his phone. Want to hear the recording I made of our conversation 3 weeks ago? The one where you laugh about how easy it is to manipulate lonely old women and their devoted sons. The recording quality wasn't perfect, but Sarah's voice came through crystal clear. The old bat is so desperate for grandchildren, she'll believe anything. And the son? Complete mama's boy. All I have to do is cry about my tragic past. And he writes another check. Andrew's face went white, then red, then a sickly gray that made me want to rush to his side. But this moment wasn't about protecting him anymore. It was about him finally seeing the truth. You want to hear the best part? Sarah's voice continued from the phone. She gave me her grandmother's pearl necklace. Said it was a family heirloom. I'll probably hawk it after the honeymoon. Instinctively, Andrew's eyes went to Sarah's throat, where my grandmother's pearls gleamed against her pale skin. Pearls worn by 4 generations of Thompson women, passed down from mother to daughter-in-law as a symbol of acceptance and love. Sarah's hands flew to her neck, covering the necklace as if she could hide the evidence. Andrew, I can explain. Explain? What? His voice was deadly quiet now. Explain how you've been laughing at my mother behind her back while spending her money. Explain how you called me a mama's boy while pretending to love me. Explain how you were planning to rob us blind and disappear. The fight went out of Sarah all at once. Her shoulders sagged. And for the first time since I'd met her, she looked her actual age instead of the innocent young woman she'd been pretending to be. It started as a job, she said quietly, just another mark. But then, I don't know, I thought maybe I could make it real by lying about everything. Andrew's voice cracked. Your name, your job, your family, your Entire life story. What exactly was supposed to be real about us? Sarah looked around the chapel one more time, the hundreds of faces staring at her with shock, disgust, and fascination, the elaborate flower arrangements. The photographer still snapping pictures, the videographer capturing every moment of her public humiliation. I need to leave, she whispered. Yes, Andrew said simply, you do. But Sarah Collins wasn't finished. As she gathered up her dress to walk down the aisle, she turned back to face me with a look of pure hatred. You think you've won, don't you? Congratulations, Mrs. Thompson, you got your precious son back, but you know what? He's never going to trust another woman again after this. You've ruined him for love forever. Also, you could stay the most important woman in his life. The words hit their mark. I felt a stab of doubt, wondering if my quest for justice had crossed the line into something darker and more selfish. But Andrew surprised me. No, he said firmly, she didn't ruin me. You did, and you know what the difference is? Mom was trying to protect me, you were trying to destroy me. Sarah's face twisted with fury. You'll regret this, both of you. I have friends. Connections. This isn't over. Marcus stepped forward, his expression amused. Actually, it is over. See, while you've been putting on your little performance here, the FBI has been very interested in our conversation about your current con game. They're particularly fascinated by your fake social security number and fraudulent employment history. Sarah's face went pale. You wouldn't dare. Already did, sweetheart. They should be here any minute to escort you out. He checked his watch. In fact, I'm surprised they haven't arrived yet, as if summoned by his words. Two men in dark suits appeared at the chapel entrance. They moved with the purposeful stride of federal agents, and Sarah's last hope of a dignified exit evaporated. Sarah Collins, the taller agent said, holding up his badge. FBI, you're under arrest for fraud, identity theft, and violation of federal banking regulations. What followed was a scene I'd never imagined at my son's wedding. Federal agents reading Miranda rights in a chapel decorated with white roses and baby's breath. Wedding guests fumbling for their phones to record history in the making. A bride in a $12,000 dress being led away in handcuffs. Sarah didn't go quietly. As the agents escorted her down the aisle, she kept turning back to scream at Andrew and me. This is harassment. I haven't done anything wrong. You'll be hearing from my lawyers. But her protests fell on deaf ears. Half the chapel had their phones up recording Sarah's arrest, while the other half was already busy texting the breaking news to friends and family who hadn't been there to see it live. By nightfall, the video would be all over social media, with hashtags like #weddingcrash and #conartistbride. Once the agents walked Sarah out, a strange, heavy silence fell over the chapel. 300 guests sat frozen in the pews, unsure whether to clap, cry, offer condolences, or just quietly sneak out. The minister looked like he was silently praying for the ground to swallow him whole. Clearly, this wasn't the kind of crisis management they'd covered back in seminary. Andrew was still standing at the altar, tuxedo immaculate, staring at the double doors where his bride had just been hauled away in handcuffs. I ached to go to him, but something told me not to. He needed this moment for shock, for grief, for whatever pieces of dignity he could salvage. Finally, he turned back to the congregation. Well, he said, his voice carrying through the silence. This is awkward. A ripple of nervous chuckles ran through the room. I want to thank you all for coming today. I know this isn't exactly how you planned to spend your Saturday afternoon. He paused, running a shaky hand through his hair. The wedding is obviously canceled, but the reception is already paid for. So if anyone wants dinner and an open bar, be my guest. God knows I could use a drink. This time the laughter was real, a little cathartic even. Guests began standing, stretching, murmuring in small groups as the shock started to lift. Andrew finally looked my way. Our eyes locked across the chaos, and in his gaze I saw gratitude, embarrassment, and maybe, just maybe, admiration. He walked down the aisle, and people instinctively stepped aside for him, parting like the Red Sea. When he reached me, he stopped, studying my face in silence for a long moment. Mom, he said at last, his voice low. We need to talk. I nodded. Yes, we do. But before I could say more, he reached up and unclasped my grandmother's pearl necklace from around Sarah's throat. He held it out to me with both hands. These belong to you. I took them, fingers trembling, and felt the familiar weight settle into my palms. Actually, they belong to the woman my son marries when he finds someone truly worthy of them. Andrew's eyes filled with tears. I'm so sorry, Mom, for not believing you, for choosing her over you, for being such an idiot. You weren't an idiot, sweetheart, I said softly, reaching up to straighten his tie, a gesture I'd been making since he was a little boy in clip-ons. You were in love. Or at least you thought you were. Love makes us all vulnerable. What matters is you're safe now. His voice cracked. How long did you know? I started to suspect about a month ago. Had proof 2 weeks back. I met his eyes. I hired a private investigator. And Marcus, he volunteered when I told him where to find her. Turns out, hell really does have no fury like a con artist scorned. Despite everything, Andrew laughed. You've been busy. I've had a very educational few weeks, I said, slipping my arm through his. Now, what do you say we go face the music at your non-reception? People will have questions. As we walked down the aisle together, I caught fragments of conversation swirling around us. Most of it was shock and amazement, but there were also words of concern for Andrew and more than a little respect aimed my way. Mrs. Henderson, our neighbor, grabbed my arm as we passed. Margaret Thompson, you are one smart cookie. I never trusted that girl. Too pretty, too sweet. Real women have edges. The reception that wasn't a reception turned out to be the most genuine party I'd ever attended, with the illusion of a wedding stripped away. People relaxed. The bar opened early. The band switched from wedding standards to blues. Conversations flowed easily, the kind that only come after shared chaos. Andrew carried himself better than I could have dreamed. He moved through the room with grace, thanking people for being there, apologizing for the mess, even cracking jokes. He accepted condolences with humility, met people's eyes with honesty. I watched him from across the ballroom and felt a fierce pride not in his career or his accomplishments, but in the strength he showed under fire. That's when Marcus Rivera found me lingering near the dessert table, where I was debating whether it was socially acceptable to eat wedding cake when there hadn't been a wedding at all. Double quotes Mrs. Thompson, Marcus said as he extended his hand. I wanted to thank you for giving me the chance to face Sarah after all this time. I shook his hand. I should be thanking you. I never could have exposed her without your help. What you did took guts. He shook his head. Not many mothers would go to those lengths. Any mother would have done the same thing to protect her child. Marcus smiled. No, ma'am. Most mothers would have tried to talk their son out of it and failed. You played chess while the rest of us were playing checkers. After he left, I was alone with my thoughts for the first time all day. The adrenaline was fading, leaving exhaustion in its wake, and maybe a hint of sadness. Yes, I'd saved Andrew from a terrible marriage and financial ruin, but I'd also shattered his faith in love, at least for now. Had I done the right thing? Mom, Andrew appeared at my side, carrying 2 glasses of champagne. You look like you're having second thoughts. I accepted a glass gratefully, just wondering if there might have been a gentler way to handle this. You mean like sitting me down and telling me my fiancé was a con artist? His eyebrows lifted. Because we both know how well I would have taken that news. He wasn't wrong. You would have thought I was jealous, controlling, and I would have accused you of exactly what Sarah said, trying to keep me dependent on you forever. He took a sip, then added quietly, you know what really changed my mind? It wasn't Marcus showing up. It wasn't even the recording. It was watching Sarah's face when she realized you'd outplayed her for just a second. Her mask slipped, and I saw who she really was. What did you see? Cold calculation, he said, and genuine respect for a worthy opponent. He turned to me. She underestimated you completely. Thought you were just a lonely old woman desperate to keep her son. She had no idea she was trying to con someone smarter than she was. I'm not sure about smarter. Maybe just more motivated. Mom, you orchestrated the exposure of a professional con artist using her own partner and the FBI. That wasn't just instinct. That was strategy. We stood together in comfortable silence, watching friends and family drift into something resembling a party. The band had switched to jazz. Couples were dancing, and the disaster was slowly turning into celebration. I have a confession, Andrew said at last. What's that? Part of me is relieved, not about the humiliation or the arrest, but he hesitated. Something always felt off about Jessica. I could never pin it down, but sometimes, when I caught her off guard, she looked at me like she was trying to remember who she was supposed to be. Why didn't you say anything? Because I thought it was just wedding stress. And because, he sighed, I was 32 years old and had never been in love before. I thought if I questioned it too much, it might disappear. My heart ached for him. Oh, sweetheart, I know, pathetic, right? The mama's boy who falls for the first pretty girl who pays attention to him. No, I said firmly. Human, you're human, and humans want to be loved. There's nothing pathetic about that. Even when we make terrible choices about who to trust, especially then. I squeezed his hand. Andrew, what Sarah did to you wasn't your fault. She's a professional liar. She studied you, learned what you wanted to hear, and became that person. You weren't gullible. You were targeted. Andrew's grip tightened. Thanks, Mom, for everything, for seeing through her, for protecting me, and for doing it in a way I couldn't ignore. You're welcome, but next time you fall in love, maybe introduce me earlier in the process. He laughed. Next time I fall in love, I'm running a full background check first. That might be a bit extreme. After today, not so much. Besides, I've learned something very important about the women in my life. What's that? Never underestimate a Thompson woman. Apparently, we're much more dangerous than we look. I smiled, lighter than I'd felt in months. Your grandmother would have been proud. She would have loved watching you work. Andrew raised his glass. Here's to justice, served ice cold with a side of public humiliation. I raised mine to meet his. Here's to family and knowing when to fight for the people you love. As our glasses clinked, I realized that despite everything, the lies, the betrayal, the spectacle, I was exactly where I was meant to be. Standing beside my son, safe, free, finally seeing him clearly again. Sometimes the best weddings are the ones that never happen. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.